Hello, my dear children. How are you all? I hope you people are fine by the grace of the Almighty. Well, I had sent you previously the notes from the economics chapter, the story of village Palampur. I hope you children have read those notes carefully, and along with that, I had also requested you to read the chapter. So today in this video, I am going to try to explain you the main contents of the chapter. Okay, and please remember to read this chapter thoroughly again. The more you read this chapter, you will understand it better, and also go through the notes that I have sent you. So the first chapter of economics is the story of village Palampur. Agriculture, remember, in our country agriculture contributes a significant 18% to the national GDP, gross domestic product. It employs around 50% of the country's workforce. That means it's a major employment generating sector in our country. Thus, it is the most important sector of Indian economy. Remember that, the agricultural sector, because though the technological sector is now coming up, but in spite of that, still people depend on agriculture. So you cannot just neglect it now. This chapter that you are talking about, the story of village Palampur, deals with topics that are related to the organization of production, labor, work, capital production, and transport. And there are many other factors also. Remember, in this story, in this chapter, we have taken the story of Palampur, that is imaginary name. It's not a real village, but you can say it's an imaginary village. But but the story that you read here is very much like most of the villages in our country. Agriculture is the main activity in Palampur, and there are, apart from agriculture, there are other activities like small scale manufacturing, dairy, transport, etc. Palampur also has a well developed system of roads, transport, electricity, irrigation, schools, and health centers. So we can say that this very much tells us about any village. If we see, there are a lot of development works taking place. So to begin with, in this chapter, let's begin with the organization of production. Remember, the main aim of production is always to produce essential goods and services. Anything that is produced is the thing that is required, essential. It can be in the form of goods or it can be in the form of services. The production of anything requires four essential things that are known as factors of production. The first factor of production is land. It also includes other natural resources like forests, water, etc. Second, the second factor of production is labor, the work, that is the workers that are involved in the production. Third is the physical capital. Now this physical capital is divided into fixed capital and working capital. Apart from this physical capital, we have the human capital, or the knowledge, the enterprise, and the skill that is a part of this human capital. Remember, the fixed capital that we talked about is includes the tools, machines, buildings, and so on, whereas the working capital includes raw material, the money, etc. The fixed capital, once used, you can use it again, like the machines, the tools. You can use it over a period of time, over many years, period of years. Whereas working capital, once used up, again, the next production, you have to get it all over again. Now, let's move on to agriculture in Palampur. Let's first talk about all the points that are related to how agriculture is practiced in Palampur. The first point tells us people here are mostly dependent on farming for their well being and survival. But there is a problem in agriculture, one problem, major problem that these people in Palampur face. That is, the land area that is used for cultivation is fixed. That means they have a fixed area for cultivation, they cannot increase it. During rainy season, the farmers practice growing jowar and bajra, followed by they grow potato between October and December. Whereas in winter, December, January onwards, they grow wheat and sugarcane. So in any village you go, this is the pattern they follow. According to the seasons, different crops are grown. Now we were told that Palampur had a well developed electricity and irrigation system. So due to this, the farmers here have started practicing what is known as multi-cropping. The farmers here are also using modern farming methods such as HYV seeds, that is high yielding variety of seeds. They are well aware of the green revolution that has increased the yield on a limited piece of land. The farmers here use modern farming methods such as using chemical fertilizers, okay? And remember, this usage of chemical fertilizers has led to the overusing of natural resources, and it has also destroyed the soil, it has destroyed the fertility of the soil, and it has reduced the groundwater level to a large extent. So remember, what we need to learn from this, that using modern farming techniques also brings certain problems along with that. Now let's move on to how the land is distributed here, the distribution of the land. The land in Palampur, it is said, is unevenly distributed, like in most of the villages. It is in Palampur, there are 450 families. One third of those families, that is 150 Dalit families, they are all poor and landless. 60 families belong to the medium and large farmer category. They cultivate more than 2 hectares of land. Remember, more than 2 hectares of land. 240 smaller farm families cultivate less than 2 hectares of land. And as I told you, the remaining 150 families, they are landless. They mostly work on other farmers' lands. Now, we talk about the capital, that is physical capital. The small farmers cultivate their own land, whereas the medium and large farmers, they hire laborers, especially the Dalits, that is those who don't have their own land. They hire those laborers. Laborers have no right over the land, that the crops that they produce, and they are paid sometimes in the form of cash or sometimes in the form of kind, that is crops. Sometimes they are given crops for the work that they do. Modern farming methods require plenty of capital. The medium and large farmers, as we can understand, they have their own savings, so they use this for the production next year. Now, the smaller farmers, as we know, they may have less land, so they cannot use their savings. So they depend on borrowing from money lenders or traders, who then charge a high rate of interest. Some part of the crops that are produced, they are used for the self consumption by these families, whereas the rest are sold in the market. However, only the mostly in most cases it happens that the medium and the large farmers, they manage to sell their crops. Okay, poor farmers, the Dalits, they are not able to have any kind of savings. So they mostly rely on taking debts and they fall into a problem known as debt trap. Debt trap. So this was about agriculture in Palampur. Your chapter also talks about some non-farming activities that go on in Palampur. About 25% of the working population of Palampur is engaged in non-farming activities such as dairy, small-scale manufacturing, shopkeepers, transport, etc. Talking about the dairy, people here, some of the people here have their own cattle. They feed their cattle with the crops that are grown here, and then they sell this milk. They sell this milk that they obtain from the cattle in the nearby town that is Raiganj. People here, some of the people, as their to earn money, they have set up chilling centers, what are known as chilling centers. Here the the cattle rearers, they bring their milk and they sell it here at the chilling centers. These people at the chilling centers then send this milk to other neighboring towns and cities. Second activity, non-farming activity, is the small scale manufacturing. Around 50 people, they said roughly around 50 people are engaged in small scale manufacturing. This is done at the homes or in the fields. So they do not require much machinery or physical capital, fixed capital. They use simple methods. And as for the labor, they do not require. Mostly the people who are at home, they are involved in this work. Next non-farming activity is shopkeepers. Some people here, they buy goods such as biscuits, soap, toothpaste, batteries, candles, stationery, cloth, etc. from wholesale shops in towns, and they sell them here in their village through small general stores. These people, maybe during the weekends or during the off days, sometimes they go to the neighboring towns and cities, buy the things, they bring it here, and with a little profit they sell it to the villagers here in Palampur. The next non-farming activities, the transport. Now this sector has developed quite well in Palampur, and most of the villages, we know that the roads are not so good, so the transport sector is not well developed. But in other most of the other villages, they are now developed, so the road system is quite good there. Here in Palampur, they have a well-developed road, and because of this, lot of people get engaged in work in this sector. We have the rickshaw pullers, the tongawalas, the horse cart drivers, we have the truck drivers, bus drivers, okay, autos, cabs, and so on. So people are now slowly, getting engaged in this transport sector. Apart from transporting people, they also transport goods from one place to another. So, the purpose of this chapter, through the example of Palampur, is to tell you about how the system of work in the villages go on. This story of Palampur that you have seen, it tells you that how people in the villages engage themselves and how the economy is developed in the villages. So that's all in this chapter. Please, once again, I request you to read the chapter thoroughly. Apart from these notes that I have sent you, kindly read the chapter, okay, and solve the exercise that is given at the end of this chapter. You can now try solving this exercise in your notebooks. If there are any doubts, any questions, kindly type it. Kindly type it in the WhatsApp group. I will try to solve your problems. Okay, so once again, I want to remind you that read this chapter thoroughly, read all the notes that I have sent you, read them carefully. The notes are all simplified, so go through them and also read the chapter wherever important terms, important figures are there. Try to find out. Okay, try to make a search on your own and find out. Okay, so that's all in this chapter, right? I'll be next chapter I'll be discussing with you later on. So study this chapter well, okay, and solve the question answers in your economics notebook. Your notebooks you are going to divide into two parts, okay. One notebook will be used for history and civics, whereas the second notebook will be divided into geography and economics. Okay, all the best. God bless you. Stay safe.